House of X issue 2 is here and my brain is broken. We're going to talk about some of my thoughts. So there was a lot of talk at Marvel that this issue was huge, that this issue was going to be a revelation, and actually, for once, Marvel's hype paid off. This is every bit worth the hype. We find out that, spoiler alert, Moira McTaggart is a mutant. Her power is reincarnation, and as long as she lives past year 13 of her life, which is when her mutant powers manifest, she will be reincarnated again in her life to start it anew, brand new, all over again. Now, everyone else in time is at the same point as she is when she's born, so everyone develops at the same time. She meets Charles Xavier at university at the same time, so these are like divergent timelines moving independently of each other. It's the only way I've been able to rationalize it in my head without it exploding, so that's what I'm going with. It also appears to be the way it works based on the timelines offered at the end of this issue, but now we're getting ahead of ourselves. There's 10 lives that she's going through so far. Destiny informs her that she only has around 10 or 11 when she threatens her life after she develops a cure in year 3, or not year 3, but life 3. So we start with her first life, in which she leads a totally quiet life, and it's actually kind of tragic because she goes throughout her life without meeting any mutants, and it doesn't even seem like she's aware of mutants' existence, which is a huge part of her character. She dedicates her whole life to mutants, and in her first life, she never meets them. She grows old, she marries, she makes a family. In her second life, obviously, is where she starts realizing something weird's going on. At a very young age, she can read, write, and speak. In the womb, she has consciousness, awareness, and she's basically like, well, shit, I need to figure this out, and everyone pushes her towards a life of the academic, of the sciences, because she's basically a prodigy, and she just goes with it. She's like, all right, this is the way it's going to be. There's a line in here in which she talks about being conscious in the womb and how it might be like disorienting or strange, but she basically says your mother is safe. It's kind of like a baked in comfort that comes with it, and she mentions that your mother is safe and the world out there is what's going to make you lose your mind. I thought that was interesting in the context of Proteus, her son, and his upbringing, and, you know, mother being safe, the world out there will drive you crazy. So that was kind of an interesting parallel that I drew. Now, in her second life, she sees Charles Xavier out himself as a mutant on national television. She recognizes him as someone she met in university. She originally met him there, and she sees him come out as a mutant, and she kind of has her own revelation, like, this must be connected to me. I must be a mutant. I need to go out there and meet this guy. So she gets on a plane, flies to America, the plane crashes, she dies. End of life number 2. Probably the most interesting thing to me about this life is when she's watching Charles on TV, he says verbatim what he says in Grant Morrison's new X-Men run when he outs himself as a mutant. It's the same spiel that he's giving, and in that run, Cassandra Nova is inhabiting his body at the time, so in this one, I'm just like, Cassandra, that you in there, girl? Because let's face it, in this timeline, that happened way earlier than it does in New X-Men, which is kind of suggesting that these things are all inevitable in life. The inevitability of this issue is palpable, and this goes back to something we were hinting at in previous videos. In my last Let's Talk About X, we talked about the inevitability, the cycle that mutants have to go through, and this issue very much concerns itself with that. But it was interesting taking note of the Cassandra thing, and maybe that all happens earlier, but then in this timeline, we're never going to see when the Genosha thing and when any of it really happened or happens, because Moira dies in that plane crash. So moving on to life 3. Now in her third life, she throws herself into genetics, tracks down Charles Xavier, and hangs out around him, kind of lingers around in his circles, but she comes to the conclusion that he's kind of an asshole, which, yeah, that checks out. And so she's kind of jaded by the whole thing, and she realizes this is just kind of sad, like, we're suffering. I'm tired of this already, and this guy is pushing his agenda, and we all just need to cure this. So she devotes herself to making a cure, which she successfully does, and then that's when we have our pivotal scene. I mentioned earlier that Destiny comes in and tells her about the limitations of her powers, and this is the life that happens in. The Brotherhood, or, whatever they're calling themselves at this point in time, Mystique and Pyro and Destiny track her down. Destiny the Precog is like, I've seen these futures play out, and if you think this cure is just going to be for people who want it, you're a fool, because inevitably it'll be weaponized. It always is. And yeah, she's totally right. And for Moira not to see that is like, come on, Chico, wake up. So Destiny's here to correct it, and she tells her basically, like, if you keep doing this, I will always find you. I can see these futures. And what's important to me about this life is Destiny has such a big line where she says that there's just this void where Moira is. It's like she can't see her. She can't detect her presence. And that's when we learn that Moira is a mutant, undetectable to other mutants, which would explain so much. If Moira truly has been a mutant this whole time, you would think with all the mutants she kicks it around that she'd be called out on it. She knows so many telepaths. You think at some point a telepath would be like, oh my God, what are all these lives doing here in this body, in this vessel? And no one ever has. And Sentinels have never detected her. They've never gone after her. All this is justified by one little line, and I love that Hickman addresses that right away. He's just like, look, Destiny can't see her. Destiny's like telling us that she's this empty void where there should be a mutant, a person, a power. So that's a very important line that happens in Life 3. So much happens in Life 3, but the biggest things being Destiny's warning, which totally flips things for Moira and sets her kind of into a panic mode because she realizes she can't keep doing this forever. Destiny tells her she may have 10, maybe 11 attempts if she does something right near the end, if she gets something correct near the end. So that sets her into a panic for her next life, and she gets down to business. Shaken by the events in Life 3, she starts seeing mutation a little bit differently, meets Chuck in university, and ends up falling for him. She sees him in a totally different light. She throws herself at the preservation of mutant kind, and this life is very interesting because it looks very similar to the 616, and it moves through the Silver Age, through the Gifted Years. It moves through the all new, all different era where the team shifted, and then it moves through even the AVX era where we see the Phoenix 5. But what's super interesting to me is that it all inevitably leads to an end that's very much like the Days of Future Past ending, with the Sentinels gaining dominance and just wiping out mutants. But in that last image, we see Charlie still with Xavier as they're all getting obliterated, and which would, to me, say that Cyclops never killed him in this lifetime. So that's interesting because we see the Phoenix 5 happen, and then we see that Charles Xavier is still alive at the end with Moira when everything's going to hell. So that was a little bit curious. Now, in Moira's 5th life, she's like, well, god damn it, that didn't work, and that lasted really long time, and it was okay for the most part. And so now she has a sense of urgency. At 13 years old, right when her powers manifest, she goes and meets Charles Xavier and has him read her mind, and that sets Charles in a panic mode. He basically fundamentally changes his philosophy of integration with society, and he encloses the mutants off. He builds like this massive colony in a walled city and separates themselves. This is important to take note of because Charles's whole thing is about being one, everybody coming together and supporting each other and being one community, humans and mutants. But she like really shakes him, like he's shook, and he changes his whole philosophy to pull this off, and inevitably the Sentinels come in, invade, and destroy everything. Just the inevitability of this issue is so just, it's crushing, really. Her 6th life is omitted. We don't see anything about it. It's gone, and I'm very upset. Her 7th life, Moira is totally radicalized. She is devoting her entire life this time to becoming a warrior, a soldier, an assassin, and she tracks down the Trask family line. The Trask family are just synonymous with Sentinels. They are the developers, the planners. They put all the plans into effect, and she devotes this life to finding every single one of them and trying to just snuff Sentinels out at their core. This doesn't work because at the end of this life, she finds the wild master mold facility that's producing the Sentinels. And this is also extremely reminiscent of Grant Morrison's new X-Men run, in which there are wild Sentinels about that are just like, evolving AI in the wilds that are just coming together and mass producing themselves, and those are very much present here. And when Moira finds it, she's just shocked, like nothing seems to work. And there's a great line about artificial intelligence being something that evolves just like anything else, just much like evolution. It's just something that you don't invent, you discover. Hickman relates it to fire, and I thought that was so powerful and so chilling. I legit got chills during this scene. And the Sentinels kill her. They come for her and they end her life. After all of that, after taking so many lives herself, hers is just taken by an element that was completely something she never even dreamed could happen. So this was a very chilling life to me. In her 8th life, she's like, well, Charles's dream didn't work. My joining of his dream didn't work. My doing everything by myself didn't work. I need to bring in something bigger than this. I need to bring in someone with ambition and just, he doesn't have the scruples that Charles Xavier did with operating on a larger scale, bigger than I could have dreamed of by doing myself. So she goes to Magneto. She meets him when he's camped out at the very Cthulhu Palace, the very Lovecraftian place, and she just rolls up there and she's like, hey, guess what? All this is happening and it's time we make a stand. And I love the idea of her kind of meeting him up there and him being like, this, because you remember she can't be seen as a mutant, so he's just like, what is this human doing? And I have so much in my head, a whole mini series in my head of them coming together like this, and Moira just waking up in a big cyclopean canopy bed. It's a hilarious image in my head, but this is really, really cool. And basically Magneto's like, well, we got to militarize, we got to take it, we got to take command here. And inevitably the X-Men in tandem with the Avengers take down Magneto. And to me, this was really interesting because this is the first time we see the Avengers get involved. And of course it's against Magneto. Going back throughout history, they like literally never trusted this guy. Even when he really made that switch to the good side, they were they literally threw all the other X-Men under the bus because they're like, well, I guess these guys are crazy to let this happen. So it's interesting that now the Avengers want to step in here and, take charge. Of course, it's against a mutant when it's a direct mutant threat. They're like, oh yeah, that's bad. Let's step on in. The Ninth Life is pretty much the granddaddy of all desperation. Moira teams up with none other than Apocalypse, has him evolve her. We see her kind of in a totally different form, and we all know what Apocalypse does. He enhances powers, he grants powers, he evolves people into their next state of being. And the opening intro of this issue said something like that. It said, if you have the power to survive, or if you can survive, I can make you something more. I can make you eternal. There's no doubt in my mind that Apocalypse totally transforms Moira into something totally new and something different, which might have something to do with why the line is broken during the Apocalypse timeline. The line's chopped up, and where did we see that happen? The first time, the line was broken when she was in a coma. This to me screams that she's not conscious, or she's not consciously aware, because much like in a coma, if her identity was subverted, if she was turned into a different existence, a different being, that would kind of be akin to not being conscious of her actions. There's no doubt in my mind that Apocalypse totally transforms her, changes her fundamentally, and she gets lost in this war that says it's without an end. And what's interesting about this is that the line of the Apocalypse War runs concurrent with what we see as Life 10, being the founding of House of X. These lines are running concurrently. There's no indication that Moira has died. Sure, she starts a new life in Life 10, but there's no indication on the physical timeline that we're given. We don't see all of it. It's kind of cut off, but there's no indication that she died yet. Could it be possible that there are two Moiras existing in two different timelines? I think so, because what did Apocalypse change her into? What exactly did he evolve about her power? What did he change fundamentally, structurally, to make her lose consciousness or, grant a new awareness, if that's what the broken line is telling us? What has she become? Has she become a greater, eternal, godlike figure who can exist consciously in multiple timelines? Can she know what's going on in a couple? Is the Powers of 10 timeline actually a continuation of Life 9? I don't know. We simply don't have enough here yet to make these conclusions. It's just speculation, but I think it's no coincidence that Life 9 and Life 10 are concurrently moving together, and that Life 9's line is broken, much like the line was broken when she fell into a coma. I don't think any of this is a coincidence, and they just have a war without end. She just completely gives into that. And in Life 10, if we're led to believe this, Life 10 is where House of X is founded, and perhaps what really kicks it off is the conversation between them on the park bench. We're not told that that's going on, so we can only either choose to assume and just, and follow that, or we can really dig in a little bit deeper and ask ourselves. It's important to note that after Life 9, there are two all black panels. You can't see a damn thing, and it just says and then and then. To me, those look like redactions. Those look like blankness in her memory. The story is being told by a mysterious narrator that we don't know. It's just this, this higher narrator, and it's Moira interacting with the narrator and with us, adding to it. Now, the narrator is blocking these out, and Moira's not contributing to the story either. We see her stop contributing early in the issue. So there are pieces missing, and they're probably huge. Since Life 9 and Life 10 are still going, there's a connecting thread there that's omitted that we're not seeing. So something is going on, and we literally don't have enough here to figure that out. Something else I want to add about Life number 9 is that there's a line in there about it has something to do with Apocalypse simply being the one thing Moira hasn't tried yet. And in my head, I'm just like, we ain't seen Sinister in any of these lives. They ain't no Life 6 going on in this book. Is Sinister have something to do with Life 6? What are the mysteries of Life 6? It's really, really bugging me. So in case it wasn't painfully obvious, you guys, I loved this issue. This issue was so cool to turn everything on its head like this, because this is a game changer. I'm seeing people online like, oh, this isn't that crazy. We've seen this go on in comics before. I'm like, listen, we're talking in the context of X-Men. Making this kind of move with Moira is really fucking cool. And I don't think any of us can sit here and deny that. What's interesting is that I'm not going to sit here and say, I thought this would happen, that she would be a mutant, but I saw an interview with Hickman, before House of X even started. It was one of the many interviews that people were doing with him. This one was an official Marvel one. And one of the questions was, do you think the non-mutant characters belong in an X-Men book? His answer was absolutely not. That's what he said. And I'm sitting there watching that interview, and I look back at like the covers that are coming out, and Moira is all over several of them. And my ass was sitting there like, that's weird. What a weird thing to say. Like, it never even dawned on me like that she was A, gonna be a mutant, and B, gonna be a mutant. That was this big of a deal. Like, it didn't even occur. But like, I instantly remembered that interview, and I was like, no shit. Like, why didn't I make that connection that he was gonna go and do this? Like, what? Needless to say, the writing is awesome. I'm having a great time with House of X and Powers of 10. This is so cool. The art in this book, Pepe Larraz, still on point. Forever on point. I love this guy. Marte Gracia is still doing weird fleshy color things that are weird, but this issue, it almost made sense to me because it worked in tandem with the way Pepe Larraz illustrated Charles Xavier. When he's on TV and he comes out as a mutant, he looks strange. I don't know if it's just me, but he's visually odd to look at. And when I looked at it closer, with the idea in my mind that maybe this is Cassandra Nova, because this happens when Cassandra's inhabiting his body during Grant Morrison's new X-Men run, he looks there's almost effeminate features. It's almost a little bit, you know, traditionally like a female bone structure, and the way his lips are kind of parted. It really makes me wonder if that was hinting, if those are visual hints that Cassandra's in there. I don't know. I honestly don't think that Cassandra has much of a place in this story. I mean, I haven't really thought of it in that context a lot, but it's just a weird detail that I thought of because of how weird he looks in that panel. In addition to Marte Gracia's, like, you know, penchant for the strange color gradients in people's faces. But this time, like I said, it kind of worked because he looks off in general. Pepe's lines made him look off. But this is great. If you're not reading this, I don't know what to say. I don't know what to tell you. Go read the book. There's just some of my thoughts. I'm not going to go too heavy into the timeline because I know there's a lot of places where you can find the timeline being dissected. We're all kind of collectively doing it on Twitter, and I'm loving that. The theories have been really fun to read. It's really funny to me that a lot of people, like, when they share their thoughts, they say it like it's fact. That's hilarious. You guys are cute because, like, literally none of us know what's going on. So that's funny. Keep doing that. So thank you so much for watching. Share your comments down below. Thanks for all the support on my last Let's Talk About X video. I don't think there's going to be a deconstructing for this issue because we're dealing with some like strange timey-wimey agey weirdness stuff. And to be honest, nothing interests me less than talking about someone's age in a comic book. And when I saw that she was, you know, accomplishing things at a certain age in her life, that evokes thoughts of years, the passage of time in comics. That suggests the age of everyone else around her. And honestly, I was like, fucking shoot me. Like, this is so annoying in comics because the more you talk about how nonsensical people's ages are and the passage of time is in comic books, the more you disassociate from the suspension of disbelief that these books call for, that you need to have in order to enjoy these stories of narratives that are going on for decades in real life time. It just gets stressful. And I talk to so many people who don't read comics and they point that out and they kind of stick their noses up. And I'm just like, look, you got to move past that. If you can't move past that, you can't read superhero comics. It's just not going to work. And so when this book is kind of concerning itself with that, I was like, oh Christ, like, I'm not going to sit here for 15 minutes during a deconstructing video like I've been doing and talk to you about like the little nitpicky age stuff. Like, I refuse. But everyone's been really supportive. I hope this Let's Talk About video was more than enough to kind of get juices going and to touch base with you guys. I had fun making this one. I had lots of fun reading this issue, and I hope you did too. If you liked watching this video, give it a thumbs up and subscribe to me. I will be back later with more X-Men goodness, and say it with me. We are the Mutant Menace. Peace out. Oh shit, raise your hand if you just thought of Moira McTaggart as a Christ figure with her power of reincarnation, resurrection, and how House of X is founded in year 10 in Jerusalem, the place where it's thought that Christ rose from the dead.